Coming up on Verse, Chorus, Verse, 2 albums made with the sounds of their time. Let's see if they should have stayed there.
The sun would set and we would come alive.
Welcome to episode 74 of Verse, Chorus, Verse. I am DL. With me is Evil, early riser Jimmy. Evil, how are you this morning?
I'm fantastic. I've been up since 6 o'clock this morning on a Saturday.
That's my kind of Saturday. I love getting up early on Saturdays. You do? Not you.
No.
Why have you been up since 6?
Well, we're recording a double header today.
We are.
And so I wanted to be up and at 'em and prepared, and I have a head full of music. I think it might all leak out before we get done.
You're going to start mixing up the episodes. And
Yep.
Suddenly mid-review, you're going to be talking about a whole other album.
Yep.
It's the middle of summer. That means lots of people on vacation, lots of people doing this, doing that. I think there's going to be a couple times where we have to knock out 2 episodes in a day or something like that. This is one of those days. So Evil and I are going to get to work. We're going to take a very small break, and then Rachel's going to join us, and we're going to do our quickfire reviews today. But today, or now, or whatever, I don't know, whatever you people want to say, we are doing an album exchange. The episodes that took up most of the episodes in season 1 were Sven and I exchanging albums. That's kind of the whole idea for this podcast. Where it came from was I give you an album that I know really well that you don't, vice versa. That's what we're doing. Evil and I picked 2 albums, one that he's liked for a really long time, one that I've liked for a really long time that neither of us knows the other, and that's it. Do you like doing these kind of episodes, Evil?
Well, this is the first one that I've joined to do.
Rachel's done one, and now this is your first one.
And I like it because this is kind of how we used to communicate. Ancient Google Hangouts chat. This is sort of what we did. We would just like swap music and do top 5s, and so it's kind of like going back to what we were doing early on that sort of, I think, was the inception for this podcast. So it's fun. I hope we get to do this a little bit more.
The inception of this podcast was basically 50-50. What the hell was that? Sorry, I just got this screaming pain in my ribs. That was really weird. Okay. What was I talking about? Just so everybody knows, my voice sounds like shit, everything. I'm dying. Just so everybody's clear on that. I've been traveling a ton for work and working crazy hours, and it finally caught up to me. So I've been triple-digit fever, fucking dying. But hey, that doesn't matter. We got to give you the content. And to be honest, my fever broke last night, so I feel way, way better. But now I have this weird pain in my ribs. So if any of you are a doctor, please write me. Maybe I'll push this episode to come out sooner or something. I don't know. Yeah, so the inception of this podcast was basically 2 ideas. It was exactly what Evil just said. It was he and I and another friend of ours, Mike, used to trade albums. We used to talk top 5s, all that stuff. And then when I started listening to podcasts, like I didn't start listening to podcasts until a pretty long time after they've been big, probably like 4 or 5 years ago. But eventually I came across My Favorite Murder. They're super into true crime and they've been obsessed with it their whole lives. And so each one of them takes turns explaining one story about a murder or a serial killer to each other. And I was like, fuck, we could just do that about albums. And it'd be awesome. So thank you, My Favorite Murder, because you're kind of half of our... That's exactly where this whole thing came from. That's what we're going to do tonight.
I really appreciate that it's grown into way more than that. But I also feel like keeping to those roots from time to time, it'll keep kind of the general feel of the inception of the podcast going, but it's also just fun. I enjoy this quite a bit.
Me too. You know, it's fun to really rabbit hole when we're dissecting a band or something and learning their story. It's really fun to take a shit ton of albums and just real quickly, this is what I think, this is what I think. But these ones where you really get to delve into one specific piece of art and listen to it 4 or 5 times, that was the whole point of this. And that's where I'm most passionate about for me, is getting to know this one specific album. And then suddenly you have another favorite album. That's the whole fucking point. So that's what we're doing. Before we get into that, we got to talk about the most important part of the night. What are we drinking? I'm starting because I'm boring. I'm drinking a ton of water and I'm eating cough drops and I do have some Robitussin.
Yes.
So that's
the
what I'm
tussin.
Yeah. That's what I'm drinking.
That's awesome.
Evil, what are you drinking? I think I know, but maybe it's something different.
Well, originally I'm like, okay, we're recording this in fairly early evening drinks. I was going to avoid those. And so yesterday I'd already been out and ran errands and stuff. And I got back and I'm like, oh yeah, I need something for the podcast in the morning. Bloody Mary or mimosa, the two obvious ones. Bloody Mary wasn't going to work because the closest thing I had to tomato juice was a carton of tomato soup. And I didn't want to put vodka in that.
No.
I did have oranges and I'm like, oh sweet, I'll do mimosas. But no champagne, no Prosecco. So I got the bright idea because I got my mind on my money and my money on my mind.
Oh,
I'm
gin
having
and
gin
juice?
and juice.
Awesome.
And the gin I'm using is Hendrick's. It's one of their special releases called Orbium, which has wormwood in it, like what you
absinthe?
would have in tonic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a little bit of that quinine flavor to it. I think the idea of that gin was to have like a gin and tonics flavor with just the gin. It's tasty. It's refreshing. I feel great.
I'm a very big fan of gin and juice. I don't know why I don't drink it more often.
Because it's really easy to drink.
Yeah.
You get yourself in trouble pretty fast.
That's true. I read a thing just last night, actually, when I was up all night coughing, and it was the New York Times saying that the drink of summer is the Dirty Shirley.
Never even heard of that.
It's like a Shirley Temple, but it actually has booze in it.
No.
But it looks fucking gross. It's, God. It's ginger ale or lemon lime soda. So ginger ale or 7-Up or Sprite with grenadine and vodka.
That sounds like headaches.
I mean, I'm sure it'd be sweet and good, and that sounds like a frat drink or a
Yeah.
A good gin and tonic is.
Yeah, in the summer.
It's you just are never gonna beat that in the summer. The only thing that
Yep.
comes close is I will make mojitos with We Grow Mint.
Nice.
Fresh mint in a mojito is, man.
That's the way to go.
Yeah.
That is really the way to go.
Those are the two drinks of summer. Don't listen to the New York Times. A Dirty Shirley, come on. Good news, Evil. Today is June 25th. You don't have to come back on until July 15th.
Oh, geez.
So
That's quite the break.
You get a long time to listen to new music.
Yeah, I'm going to.
For now, we got to get to this older music that we listened
Yeah.
to this year. We are going to get into that. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Jupiter, you're seemingly so right. Jupiter, you're seemingly so right on up. Jupiter, you're seemingly so right. Jupiter, you're seemingly so
For this episode, I picked between two different albums from the same band to give DL. I picked Jupiter by Cave-In.
point of view to be the center of
Jupiter by Cave-In, released in the year 2000. Produced by Brian McTernan, which it doesn't look like did too much else. We did get the rights to this music to play. So
Awesome.
thank you
That's-
very much to Cave-In and their label Hydra Head. We're very excited to get to play this stuff to show people a little bit about it if you'd never heard it, because I had not. I'm not sure I knew Cave-In. So why this album, Evil?
I'm a big fan of this band. They're part of this post-rock, post-metal scene, bubbled up late 90s, early 2000s, kind of centered in the Boston area. There's crossover with the band ISIS, with Converge, with Old Man Gloom.
That's an unfortunate name.
ISIS. Yeah. It's a fantastic band. Aaron Turner, integral with Hydra Head Records. I picked this album because it was a huge direction change for the band. I fell in love with Until Your Heart Stops, which is the previous album, which is amazing. It's more in the like Dillinger, Escape Plan, Converge vein, like math metal.
Okay.
And with hardcore vocals done by their bassist Caleb Schofield, who has passed away, which is super unfortunate. This one is way more of a space rock. I mean, it's like Radiohead meets Neurosis.
I'm glad that you said
I would
that.
say.
And that's funny because I did a Radiohead comp in one of their songs that I thought was just complete. I thought you were going to be like, what the fuck are you talking about? But
No.
Okay.
I think that's well within the bounds.
what is space rock?
I don't know. I mean,
Okay, I don't
it's
know
called
either.
Jupiter.
Because I've heard that before.
Yeah.
And I don't like, what the fuck? What even is that? What does that mean?
I think it's got like atmospheric, you know,
A little bit of empty space play or
some empty space. Their kind of main songwriter, Stephen Brodsky, stepped up to be the main vocalist for this. It's a very different kind of album from what they were doing before. The fans are divided on this album because it's so different from their other material. I like it for a number of reasons, one of which is it introduced a whole new tapestry of sounds for the band moving forward. So they kind of like eventually reintegrated their previous sound with this sound moving forward. But I thought this was a good starting point for you to kind of introduce you to the band.
That's extremely interesting for a reason that will get brought up later on. So I'm glad that you said that. This is a very, very 2000 sounding album to me.
Yeah.
Right when you hear it, you can pinpoint within 3 years of, oh, this album came out between 98 and 2001 or something like that. Guaranteed. It was one of those that just straight up, the first couple times I heard it, I was not impressed. I just wasn't. But as you listen more and you're in different time periods, there are certain things that they're doing that it just starts to work for you. And I think we've all had albums like that where it isn't till the fourth listen where you catch something out of nowhere and you're like, oh, that's what they're going for. I get it. There's really, really subtle keyboard synth work that I really, really like. It was kind of around that time period where that was becoming more of a thing. These, I don't know what you'd call alternative type progressive rock was starting to go back towards that sort of thing. I don't know if you're going to like or hate the extreme comp that was everywhere on this album for me. Every single song, this sounds exactly like that song from Incubus. I hear so much Incubus in this band.
That's interesting. Early Incubus or later Incubus?
What's the album that came out in 98 or 99? The one that came out right before this with Privilege.
With Pardon Me on it.
Make Yourself.
Make Yourself.
That's what it, okay. We all know Make Yourself. That comp just kept hitting in my head. And I think that that's when did you get into this? Was it at the time that this came out?
A little bit after, a couple years after. I think I found Cave In 2001, 2002-ish. This album's very interesting because, like I said, I thought it was a good starting point to introduce you to the band. The album I wanted to give you is White Silence, which I think was like 2011. The problem with that one is it merges so much of what the band had done before into this new thing. But as a starting point to dissect the band, I thought this was the album to do it because it was the kind of left turn into a different genre, I guess. And so, yeah, Incubus, that's interesting. I can see that, especially that album, especially Make Yourself.
When you're dealing with music like this, and I remember back in the day where we would just talk about albums and we'd give one to each other long time ago. I think I gave you an Our Lady Peace album.
Yeah.
I think it was like Happiness, or it was
Spiritual Machines.
Spiritual Machines.
Yep.
I think the problem with listening to albums that are so time period specific like that, it's 2022 and I'm listening to an album in 2000, those comps are going to be so strong in my head.
Right.
If you're listening to this in 2001 or 2002, all that music is still everywhere. That's just the sound, and it's amazing. Where for me, 20 years have gone by, 3 albums that sounded like that have just stuck in my head. So everything, everything's gonna be like, oh, this just sounds like that. That said, there's a lot of really interesting shit on this album. Little pieces of songs have just the coolest little stream of commerce. The verses where they're doing the kind of the eerie high guitar with him singing the same scale that the guitar's doing.
That falsetto.
That's really, really fucking cool. Big Riff has the building themes. This is something that this band does that's awesome, that it's one of my favorite things that bands do. And this band does it really well, is they start the song on a theme, and then they do their chorus, and they do their bridge, and they do their build. And then they take those themes and they change it. It's the same theme, but it's different. It's almost like what you hear in a musical. You hear the same build that was at the very beginning, 3/4 of the way through the song. They do it again, but they change it
up a bit.
I love stuff like that. This band does it really, really well. The problem to go along with that is the build up in some of these songs feels like it's build up
Just for the sake of
like
it.
we have
Yeah.
to build up to it. And Evil, you're going to love this one. But in this way, you know what it felt like to me?
What's that?
Do you remember in our first quick fire, the Ants From Up There album? Mm-hmm. They do that too. Evil's gonna kill me, but it feels like that. It feels like
That feels fair. I can completely see that. The thing that struck me about this album is how different it is. I'm going to talk about a third album. I've already brought up Until Your Heart Stops. And then the album right after this one is called Antenna. And it's interesting you bring up Incubus because Incubus had a lot of pop commercial success. And they had a similar trajectory. I mean, if you listen to the early Incubus stuff, that's like way out there when they were doing lots of drugs.
Funk was
right. Yeah. And I'm not comparing that musically to Cave In, but trajectory wise, Incubus went from this really experimental sort of segued into this like pop commercial success. Mm-hmm. Cave In tried to do that and failed miserably. They went from Until Your Heart Stops and the stuff they recorded before that, zero commercial viability. I mean, we're talking like Dillinger Converge type stuff. That's not going to be played on the radio ever. Then they did this album, which was sort of like this massive direction change. And then they recorded Antenna, all under the same name. I feel like these are different bands, really, even though the same members are in them. And it was like literally sculpted to be a pop rock album in the vein of like an Incubus or whatever of the time.
Okay.
And I think that was maybe 2002-ish, 2003-ish, something like that. So also in this same time frame, it failed. I actually really liked the album. It's crafted very well, but it felt forced by these guys. So the band kind of crumbled. And then they recorded an album called Perfect Pitch Black, where they started melding those 2-3 different sounds together. And it really came together for me on White Silence in 2011. The story of the band for me is like this progression through finding themselves and experimenting. And part of that means doing stuff that maybe feels forced to sort of really suss out what you are. They're brilliant musicians. These are like music nerds.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about this music, listening to them too, is I like this time period for musicians because you couldn't put them in a genre.
Yeah.
This music is like hippie, metal, alternative. You know what I mean? You can't pigeonhole these guys. And there was a lot of that going on back then. I love that. I think that's really refreshing that there was freedom there in the fact that bands didn't feel like they had to be doing a specific something to keep their fan base or that sort of thing. Didn't it seem like back then bands were a little okay with trying different things and fans were definitely way more okay with them trying different things? There wasn't this big social media like, what the fuck
what
is
are you
this
doing?
shit?
Stay in
Sort
your
of-
lane, you know?
Yeah.
Although there was a significant amount of fan backlash to this.
What do you like more?
I like Until Your Heart Stops more. It's more my thing. But going back to what we talked about in a couple of previous episodes, this was the time when I was getting into really heavy stuff.
Yeah.
I really enjoy this album because I think, to your point, I experienced it fairly soon after it came out. It was still pretty fresh. It was still very innovative. It got tons of praise at the time. It was well reviewed. There was a lot of nods to Radiohead, the Radiohead influence, which hadn't really been done by bands in this sort of sector at that point. Now you hear it all the time.
Yeah.
To your point, you're experiencing this with a ton of other stuff in between. I didn't expect you to love it, to be honest, but I thought it would be kind of up your alley in terms of talking about music.
It's funny because that's exactly right. It is up my alley in that it's a little experimental, a lot of really, really great musicianship. It's heavy without a lot of, I think he screams guttural sounds in like 2 songs where he's, you know what
Just
I mean?
a little
Like
bit. I couldn't find a reference point, but I think Stephen Brodsky, he's able to kind of like bring up the harsh vocals a bit. He's a brilliant guy. He's in Mutoid Man and some other stuff where he does like some harsher vocals. But Caleb Schofield, their bass player, was like their harsh vocal dude. I think I hear him on one track.
Yeah, that's really Jupiter. Very, very cool, spacey. It's an album of the time. It's an interesting band. I have more to say about the rest of the band. So let's get into awards and categories.
All right.
David Crosby Met Award, nothing. There's 15 reviews on Amazon for this album. You can tell they're all Cave-In fans. They're all like,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
Cave-In, love Cave-In. So there is no DMX award. Evil, what do you got?
What makes this album what it is the stark change of pace in their musical direction. I don't know if that fits for this award.
Yeah.
It kind of feels right.
I think it does.
But the fact that they're like, you know what, we're going to do this instead. I mean, that's pretty bold to do.
Especially that point in your career where you're up.
Yeah. Just to be like, you know what, fuck it. We're going this way. I want to do this instead.
I think that's a good answer. I can't explain how, but it feels like a band that doesn't give a fuck what the reviews are going to be or whatever. They just want to play what they want to play, which is super refreshing and bands just don't do. Overrated, underrated, properly rated. Well, I mean,
Barely rated.
yeah, I guess I'd say underrated for both in its time and currently, just because I never heard of Cave-In. I don't know who the fuck these guys are.
Not in like the metal scene, because that's such a broad category, but in this sort of genre, like the Hydra Head post-rock-ish, like not grindcore, but that sort of scene, they're very well regarded, highly regarded in that specific scene.
Okay.
And this album, I think by most people, is highly regarded today. I think mostly it had high praise, but there were also fans who are like, what is this bullshit that these guys are doing? You know?
Are they still playing?
Oh yeah, they had a new album come out this year.
Oh wow, shit.
It's an amalgam of the sounds. So they've kind of matured and progressed as the year. They've put out quite a bit of material.
Influences and influencees. I just put Incubus.
For this album,
Seriously, I just could not stop. Every single song that came on, I couldn't stop thinking about Incubus.
that had never crossed my mind before, but I totally see it now.
What about you?
Radiohead and Neurosis that's what this album is to me. It's like,
Neurosis is a good one.
yeah. At that point, like I said, not many bands had done the Radiohead slant on that kind of music. So I think that's interesting about it.
Never mind the Bullocks word. Okay, here we go. I'm going to start this because this is my story. I got through my third listen. It's good, but it's not, to me, it just wasn't hitting. And I was kind of doing like what the fuck am I missing here? That's the thing. And I used to go through the same thing with Sven. Is it take me a while, but I trust your opinions on music. So I'm like, there's things I'm missing here. What I did is I looked up their next album that would come out and I listened to it in Antenna.
Yeah.
That fucking album rocks.
I love it. That's interesting.
Yeah. So I was like, Evil, what the fuck? Like,
I
really?
honestly, I'm like, that album, I was going to pick Until Your Heart Stops or Jupiter. Those were the albums I was going to pick for this. But I kind of wanted to give you Antenna.
In retrospect, I should have gone back and listened to what they did before. But instead, let me just listen to their next album and see. Because there's something going on here. And sure enough.
I'm so glad that you did that, because it gives us a much wider ledge to stand on conversationally about this band now.
Exactly. So never mind the Bullocks Award. My answer is a resounding no, and I've only heard 2 of their albums. So yeah, what about you?
For me, no, it's a no, because I think that they did more interesting stuff prior and after. Even though this is a really interesting experiment.
John Paul Jones Award, I'll go first because mine's not very... I mean, it's kind of good. I like the poll, but I was looking for a way to make this a little more chunky, to hit a little bit harder. So I said any guitar player or producer from a Sleep album is what I said.
Yes.
So
that's awesome.
I needed a little more chunk.
Yeah. We talked about this briefly. Previous album, their main vocalist was their bass player, who does harsh vocals, like really good harsh vocals. I would have liked to have heard more of that juxtaposed on this album, along with Stephen Brodsky's more clean, popish kind of sound. Which is what they did later. That's what they segued into years later, and it works really well.
To me, that's frustrating. And maybe it's part of the sound they were going for in this album, because they were kind of going for that, well, maybe I'm figuring out what space rock is. But it seems like they were going for a little bit of emptiness and these kind of these one note plays through a song. Because if they have two good singers, there's no harmony on this album at all. There's no switch offs. That's my thing. Like, you have two good singers, use them, man.
Yeah. I think they were making a conscious departure from what they had previously done.
I think you're right. John Popper Award, the verses in Stream of Commerce definitely stick in my head. That high guitar with him doing the octave lower singing with it that's really fucking cool.
I like that. For me, it is the very last track, New Moon. He sings New Moon over and over again. And then it kind of goes to almost like this really silent space. And then the bass is playing dun dun. And it kind of echoes that New Moon. And then they bring it back. There aren't hooks in this album, really. It's not that kind of thing. That's the closest thing that I could find to being like a earwormy hook.
John Prine Best Lyric Award. So this is totally early 2000s, 90s. This is totally that style of music, hippie metal. I'm not even sure they know what the fuck they're talking about. I no longer know, she said, the way to fly myself home. May it become familiar to us all. That's a really good line.
That is a good line.
Here's a problem. He actually sings, I no longer know, she said, the way to fly home. May it all become familiar to us all. I want him to take that all out and just say, may it become familiar to us all. That's a really great line. What do you got?
Nice. It's the very opening line of the album, which is so bizarre. And I think it sets the tone for how weird they're trying to be on
That's
this.
actually a really good answer.
And it's the metronome was wrong again. My heart has surely gone and skipped a beat. Now the rhythm is all right, and I can understand your point of view. I love that.
Yeah.
It's very this album. It's very in the pocket for what this whole experiment that they're doing is.
Eddie Van Halen Award. So 4 minutes into New Moon, apparently I really liked New Moon. There's this amazing guitar and bass breakdown that's using these very unique note choices. And that's where I really got, this is super like early Radiohead. Really cool. I fucking love that.
I struggled with this because there's obvious glaring answer that it's almost too, I've already mentioned it's too on the nose, but it's the centerpiece of the album for me. And it's the big riff and big riff. That's really, for me, the meat of the album.
Surfer Rose Award, I think it just flows. I think they maybe tried to stretch it a little bit towards the end, but that also feels like they were doing that on purpose.
Yeah.
I think it's structured really well.
Yeah, I think it flows pretty well as well.
Time of Your Life Award. What is the worst song on this album? There is a point in this album where it starts to get a little too eccentric and a little too self-indulgent, and that is Brain Candle. I don't think Brain Candle is a terrible song. I just think it's at that point in the album where I'm like, okay, guys, let's try something different here for a minute, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. Mine's similar to answer to yours. I didn't pick an individual song, but there are moments, like you said, where they get a little into the weeds.
Yeah.
The second half of the album. And I don't think the second half of the album's weak. I just think they dick around a little more.
That's the perfect
that second
term.
half.
They just start dicking around a little bit. I'll start with the 3 best songs on this album. My third favorite is New Moon. We talked about it. There's just certain aspects in that song that there's little teeny great gems in that. Stream of Commerce is my number 2. I really like the sections of all the sections of the song in there. And my number 1 is Big Riff. That song's awesome. I probably won't go back and listen to this album, just to be honest, but this song, I will totally listen to this song for sure.
And twins. I have exact same top 3 as you.
Are you serious?
Exact same. Yep.
You know what that means, right?
We got to
That
drink.
means 3 shots. That's what that means.
Oh, God.
Well, it's a good thing I have some Bullet down here. I actually don't even like Bullet bourbon all that much.
I think the rye's better.
I need this anyway. All right.
Hair of the dog.
Yep. Well, it's not. I didn't get drunk last night, Evil. All right. Well, we'll see if that helps my sickness. Shit, we had the same exact 3, huh?
Yeah.
That has never happened on this show.
I knew there was something about this album that was going to work.
We haven't even touched on it. The rhythm section in this is amazing.
Yes.
The drummer
Yes.
and the bass The drums and bass in this are fucking amazing. Our bad. Who
No,
won the album, Evil?
I think Future Cave In won this album.
Oh, I like that.
It gave them something new to bring into their sound. And I
Mine is dudes that wear hemp anklets and also Metallica shirts. It's just such a cool, weird mixture that this music was back then. It's like hippie metal. It was so weird.
if you're talking music with somebody and you're like, hey, what are some of your favorite albums? And they throw this one out there, it's going to pique your interest. You're going to be like, oh.
Wait, what? I'm going to go first because I feel bad and I want Evil's to be higher for Rate the Album. My rating of this album is 6 out of 10 repeating riffs. It's a good album. You know, it's one of those things where I think if I would have heard this in 2001 or 2,
Yeah.
it would have meant a lot more to me. Evil, what about you?
I give it 8.5 Evil Jimmy trophies,
I like it.
if that's a thing.
Damn it. Now we got to... Oh, shit. You just
It's like
started
an
something.
Oscar with more muscles and a thicker brow. Yeah, 8.5. It's not my favorite Cave In album. I think it's the most important Cave In album
Okay.
in their career trajectory.
I mean, 8.5
It's pretty good.
that's high.
I enjoy it.
That's it. That's Cave-In's Jupiter.
Awesome.
Evil, thank you for giving it to me.
Yeah.
Next time,
thank
give
you
me
for
Antenna.
listening to Antenna.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
No matter how many times we hang over the wall, the writing still shines
We're back. This week, I gave Evil an album that we decided about 3 days ago we weren't going to talk about.
Psych.
For reasons that, I mean, if it's killing you to know why we decided we had to switch albums, you can write me and ask me and I will be totally honest with you. Instead, we did a kind of a 4-day emergency. So I gave
Yep.
Evil the Pinkerton by Weezer. Pinkerton by Weezer, their sophomore album released in 1996. Label is DGC, which is why we are not currently playing music from it. It was the follow-up to one of the biggest releases of our time in Weezer's Blue album. I think widely considered one of the best initial releases from a band ever. And this was a very different turn for a sophomore album. Evil, what are your initial thoughts on Pinkerton?
Ooh, boy, I have to be honest. First listen, let me back up. When we made the Audible, you're like, hey, what do you know or what do you think about Pinkerton? And I'm like, man, I know of Weezer and I know some of their albums very well.
We needed an album that would be easy to discuss. Like, even if you didn't know it, it's still, it's fucking Weezer.
Yeah, we have frame of reference,
Exactly,
obviously.
yeah.
And honestly, from their, let's call it their classic era, because they released their debut, then this, and then I guess a break of some, a little bit, and then
The Green album.
And then Maladroit. And I'm going to call that like their classic.
I
That's probably not fair.
would argue that their classic period is... No, you're right. I'd give you that.
We'll just call them those 4 albums. This is the one that I wasn't familiar with.
Oh, really?
With the exception of El Scorcho. That's really the only song that I knew from this album. I was excited because I'm like, hey, I like Weezer, especially early Weezer. And I listened to it first time through. I didn't like it.
Really?
And I think that's because my headspace was in a completely different band that I'd been listening to that we audibled from.
Ah, yeah.
And this also, a lot like Jupiter, is very much of its time. I think I would have absolutely loved this album if I got into it when it first came out. It was 96.
Yeah.
But I was listening to it in 2022 while I was mowing the lawn for the first time. And I'm like, I don't know if I like this or not. But as with all good pop, it so grew on me with subsequent listens.
Okay.
To the point to where I would start the album, listen through it, and towards the end being like, I think this picks up steam toward the end, and then it would loop back to the first. I'm like, no, this first track is fucking rad. It just took some time to kind of drill its way in.
I think in the time, because I remember this.
Yeah.
I think it was like that for people in the time.
That makes sense.
This was so different than the Blue album.
Yes.
This was like
Yeah.
a stark contrast. And
it's so much more raw.
It's so
and
raw.
Personal. Like
For Weezer.
lyrically. Yeah.
Weezer is such
Yeah, right.
Weezer is such a, the Blue album is one of the most perfectly produced albums of all time.
Yes.
And then in my opinion anyway, they got way overproduced. But this is so fucking, this is a garage band.
Completely. It sounds like almost a live recording in spots. Bumps and scars and black eyes and
Bass player screaming in the background and
yeah.
and
It's goofy at times. As it kind of burrowed its way in, I had a moment where I'm like, oh fuck, am I just accustomed to overproduced music now?
yeah.
Which made me want to just kick myself in the ass and be like, dude, because I hate that about music, and I would hate that about myself if that's true. But it reminded me that back in the day, us boomers listening to music didn't have to be immediately accessible.
Yeah.
It could take its time to work its way into your consciousness. And honestly, a lot of the really brilliant stuff has to be that way.
When this came out, it wasn't, I hung out with people that were massive. Like we all listened to the Blue album and stuff.
Yeah.
But when Pinkerton came, most people didn't listen to Pinkerton.
No.
It wasn't a fuck Pinkerton. It was literally like I don't think a lot of people even knew that it had come out.
I agree. Yeah.
Because it was a different time back then. It wasn't Weezer's coming out with another album in 14 days, hashtag
Right.
excited.
Yeah.
You basically hit on it. Look, I think like a lot of Weezer people, it's the Blue album, it's Pinkerton, and then it's everything else.
Okay.
I really don't like the Green album. I do like,
it's okay.
I like Maladroit.
I like Maladroit quite a bit.
Me too. I mean, it's fucking rock, dude. It's straight
Yeah.
up. Weezer has never hid that their influences are the Kisses and the Cheap Trick. We just talked about Cheap Trick.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
these guys' influences are those types of bands. And they've never hid that. And I think that shines most in Maladroit.
I agree. And I don't want to make this all about Maladroit, but I love that album. I love Dope Nose.
Yeah.
There was a interview leading up to the release of that album where Rivers was like, I wanted to write an album like Van Halen 2, like short and sweet and heavy rock and to the point. And I was fucking sold at that point for obvious reasons. Pinkerton is not that. It's different. It's so much more of him.
It's very grunge.
It's grunge. It's so visceral. It's almost emo in a way.
It is. You know who doesn't like this album, Evil?
Who?
Rivers.
Really?
He doesn't like that they did this album.
Is it too like telling?
It was embarrassing. He didn't think that it was well done enough. He doesn't like the whole like half Japanese girls sort of shit. Or Tired of Sex, the first song.
Yeah.
He finds it embarrassing, basically.
I could see as you age, looking back on stuff you've created and.
But
being
you know
like,
what, Rivers?
But
you have plenty other albums to be embarrassed by. Don't be embarrassed by this one. For fuck's sake, man.
yeah.
I love this album. I love the Blue album, but it easily gets lost that Weezer did something insane with their first two albums. They came out with one of the most well-produced rock albums with some of the best rock songs I've ever heard in the Blue album. Fucking Saying Ain't So is one of the best rock songs ever written.
They came out swinging for sure.
And then they followed up with this raw, garagey, the chorus of El Scorcho where they're just screaming.
Well, it starts with like a gargle. I'm like, what?
Intros to Weezer songs are so good. You always know exactly with El Scorcho when it's just a doom, 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 boom, dun, doo, and Sweater Song. God damn, they have the best intros. I don't remember. Usually I have this picturesque music weird memory thing, but the first song on this, Tired of Sex, when the drums kick in and the guitar starts doing that da-na-na-na-na-na, and he screams those two offbeat screams.
It's huge.
Yeah, I was sold. I was sold from that point on.
The only song I really liked that first listen was El Scorcho because it's the one I knew. And it's also a fucking great song. I
really
love
is.
the chorus to that song so much. It's so weird too. It combines a lot of the elements of Weezer that I really like, and it's whimsical, fucking around nature, and great chorus, and like some clever lyrics.
I asked you to go to the Green Day concert. You said you never heard of them. How cool is that?
Yeah.
So I went in your room and read your diary.
You stole what might
fuck?
have been one of my John Prine Award, but I got another one that I'll use instead. Yeah, it's so quirky, and I like that they don't hide the fact that they're just fucking nerds writing awesome music.
Yeah.
There are a ton of moments in this album where that's very apparent. First couple of listens, the emo-ness of it almost came across as whiny. Whoa, it's almost like wallowing in self-pity to a point. It didn't jive with me at first. But then you listen to it over and over and over again, and it starts making sense. I don't know how that works.
Here's the thing, and I think it's the most apparent in The Good Life, is he's not doing the, oh, I'm so sad, oh, my life, this. What he's doing is he's doing, you know what? I'm so sad, and it's fucking stupid. I shouldn't be.
Yeah, there's like a self-awareness to it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense now that I think about it.
It's kind of refreshing.
Yeah, it is.
What the fuck is my
Yeah, I'm a
problem
rock
here?
star. I've had all this success. I'm tired of sex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I didn't like that song at first, but that grew on me so much because of how absurd it is. When you frame it in the reference of them being on top of the world at this point, after releasing one album, you know, this album was a result of that first album cycle.
Oh, absolutely.
I had to kind of teleport myself back in time to wrap my head around that. Like, it's not current day Rivers singing this. It was a guy who was a young kid who was like shot out of a fucking cannon into pop culture. I mean, that first album was everywhere.
Everywhere.
And so you have to have some level of maturity and poise and grace to deal with that well. I wouldn't have been able to. I don't know who can.
No.
Framing the lyrics and what he kind of pours out in this album in that way made me appreciate it a bit more. And it just took some listens and some actual deliberate, changing of gears in the way I was listening to it. And so that was very helpful. And then you start picking up on some of the other moments, like the silliness and the quirkiness. And then it just starts working. It starts clicking and working way better.
It is. It's very, very silly. It's very quirky. You've got Why Bother, which
Also, we haven't even talked about this yet. It's a concept album of sorts.
Is it?
And that's kind of genius to me. So it's loosely based on a play, Madama Butterfly. I mean, this is where all the Japanese references come in.
I didn't even know that. I just thought he was really into Japanese women.
No. So this is kind of a loose concept album based on the story of an opera called Madama Butterfly. There's different forms of that. And that opera was based on a short story called Madame Butterfly, about this British explorer or some sort of like British dude who shows up in Japan and falls in love with this girl, has a baby with this girl, and then leaves on a boat. And it's about her story of like wishing he's going to come back. And if you read the lyrics of the songs, there's threads of that through this.
Interesting.
There's the lyrics in El Scorcho point all over the place to it. In fact, the name of the main character, the Japanese girl in the story, he talks about her in El Scorcho.
Yeah, Rivers said that the version he saw, he described as an asshole American sailor, similar to a touring rock star.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. So that makes it even more tongue-in-cheek.
Very much more.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Listening to Cho-Cho San fall in love all over again. Cho-Cho San's the main character of Madame Butterfly.
What? I had no idea.
That made that song way more interesting to me.
Wow.
Goddamn, you have Japanese girls. You do it to your mate every time. It makes way more sense in the context of this being a concept album loosely based on Madama Butterfly, based on Madame Butterfly.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought he was talking about how hot half Japanese girls are. 'Cause I'll have to edit that out. That's fucking cool. I had no idea. I didn't know. I think it was just one of those things where you hear an album and you're a kid.
Right.
It comes out, you just like it. You don't try to figure out why he was interesting.
That's the luxury of me getting to poke into this many years later. I'm digging like, hey, what made people like this? And so I start finding all the things, outlier sort of facts and bullet points and stuff. And I ran across that and I'm like, oh, that little layer of subtext makes a lot of the lyrics way more interesting to me.
Yeah. Let's go into some awards and categories on the Raw Sophomore album by Weezer. What do you have for the DMX award?
I think the DMX award, I sound like a broken record because this is similar to Jupiter, is the direction they chose to go. I mean, going from this heavily produced and crafted pop album that they had so much success with, not scrapping the entire formula, but really going to this raw, underproduced, like loud guitar. Not that they didn't have loud guitars before, but the conscious choice to be way more introspective, almost to the point of being whiny, paired with the garage band ethos of this recording. I think that was a really bold move that not many bands would do on their second album.
I think so too. That was my same answer, is to go from the Blue album to Pinkerton, which is just this complete 180 to me.
Yeah.
To do that after the Blue album was so fucking popular, that's it takes balls, man.
Yeah, it does.
Overrated, underrated in its time and currently. I think it was very underrated in its time. Currently, I think it's properly rated. I think a lot of people are like me, or there's that overlying sentiment I see online and stuff that is very, like I said, it's the Blue album and Pinkerton and then everything else. So the fact that Pinkerton is put in that category with the Blue album, I think says a lot. What about you?
I agree. I think it was off the radar in its time. So very underrated in its time. Maybe just because it wasn't known.
Yeah.
And I think it's properly rated now. Even though I hadn't listened to it, I had read about it before. Like, the story of it is that it didn't do well or wasn't well received in its time, which seems to be a bit of kind of criminal because of how good it actually is.
Yeah.
So I think it has come into its own, and I feel like it's properly rated currently.
Influences and influencees. We already talked about it. Rivers being a major 70s rock fan. So I'm going to give it up for Cheap Trick. Shout out to Tony for coming on to talk about Heaven tonight.
Yeah.
It's funny that we're going to Pinkerton now because I do think Cheap Trick is a massive influence along with bands like, Kiss and Def Leppard and that sort of thing.
Yeah. They're an interesting band because on the Blue album, you could even point to like Beatles being a major influence there. You can point to a lot of even older bands, but here it seems much more, like you said, it's got more of a grunge sound, more of a punkish ethos. So more like 70s bands to me come to mind.
Never mind the Bullocks Award. I mean, I don't think there's a person out there that would think, how would I say this? I think this is very close to their best album, but it's not by far their best album, obviously. I hold Pinkerton in a much higher regard compared to the Blue album than most people. This definitely isn't a Nevermind the Bullocks Award because the fucking Blue album exists.
Right.
Right. So
I need more time with it. In this short amount of time has grown on me quite a bit. I could possibly wind up in the same category as you. I think I would put it somewhere between where most people would rate it and where you rate it. I'm sort of above the average, but maybe a little bit below your experience with it. Will it ever get there? It could. Blue album's definitely, that is the bar that they set. I also love Maladroit quite a bit. I lose track of the other Red and Teal and whatever
because they don't
bullshit
matter.
they've done.
They honestly don't matter. You'll hear a good song on one or two of them, but it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they'll have a good track here and there. I mean, they recorded an album recently called Van Weezer, and it's just I wanted so much more from that album. It's not bad, but it disappointed me a little bit.
I mean, I just don't. When you're starting to make albums called like Van Weaver, you don't give a fuck anymore. You are officially like a bar cover band that's
of yourself.
Yeah, that's just gonna keep pumping out music to make money. Which, hey, good on you. More power to you.
Yep.
The Teach 'em Young Award, I went with El Scorcho. It's, who's not gonna hear and love El Scorcho?
Right. That's a good answer. That's probably the answer. Tired of Sex would be a great one, but I'm not going to give that to kids. So instead,
little 14-year-old David listening to that.
no, I can't do that. That doesn't feel right. I'm going to go with The Good Life instead. I feel like that's a sleeper track on this album.
Oh, that's I love that song
Yep.
so much.
Yep.
John Prine Best Lyric Award. Speaking of, I love the beginning of the I look in the mirror, can't believe what I see. Tell me who's that funky dude staring back at me. The whole thing, the whole song, we were talking about it, how he's looking at himself and he's like, I'm so fucking beat down and I'm so depressed. Then the chorus is, wait, why? Like, why am I so fucking depressed? I need to just get back out there. What about you?
Well, you stole a couple of mine already, but I got another one queued up. I just got to pull it up real fast.
I'm bummed she's a lesbian. Is that?
I love the line, I've got your letter, you've got my song. That whole piece of that song is just, it's very poignant. It's very self-aware. And that one stood out to me quite a bit.
Eddie Van Halen Award. What do you got, Evil?
I fucking love the solo on Tired of Sex.
That's my pick too.
Oh, it's so good.
I rarely actually pick a guitar solo, but yeah, them kicking into that.
Dude, it's blistering.
Yeah. Rivers can shred.
Yeah.
He needs to do it more often.
You know what it reminded me of? A little bit? The solo on Cherub Rock. Just a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
A little bit.
I like this one better, actually.
Oh, what? Fuck that.
Surfer Rosa Award. This one kind of perplexes me. It doesn't fall off a cliff, but it just changes so drastically with the last like two songs.
Okay.
From what they were doing with the first whatever songs. And it's
Okay.
also it's hard to judge structure on an album. What is this album, like 40 minutes long?
Yeah, it's short.
38?
34,
It's
36. It's under 35 minutes.
34 minutes long. Holy shit.
Yep.
Yeah, so it just is what it is. What do you think?
I feel like it starts very strong. I love the first track. For me, the strongest arc in the album is tracks 6, 7, 8, The Good Life, El Scorcho, Pink Triangle, I think is a very strong arc.
Yeah.
So I couldn't say that the second half's better than the first or vice versa.
Like if I take the vinyl and I just read Tired of Sex, Get You, No Other One, Why Bother, The Good Life, El Scorcho. I mean, there's one or two songs on here I don't completely love, so it's not.
Yeah. Since you have that in your hand, that cover relates to the theme.
Madama?
Relates to...
I mean, that makes sense.
This was originally supposed to be a rock opera.
That's so weird.
And they scrapped that, and yeah, right.
It's too... No way.
Yeah.
Time of Your Life Award. What's the worst song on this album?
I wrote one down that I went back and listened to it again. And I'm like, that's wrong. I wrote Get You down.
See, that's so surprising to me because I thought that'd be one of your favorites.
Well, I listened to it again and I loved like the whoa, whoa, whoa stuff that he does on there. And I'm like, well, that's not the right answer.
Just fooling around.
I don't have a worse song. I need to listen to this album quite a bit more. Honestly, it needs more time to marinate to form opinions like that.
See, this is the thing is I don't have a least favorite song. I guess maybe I think that Across the Sea, I don't like the transition of Why Bother into Good Life with Across the Sea in the middle.
Okay.
That's the only thing that so I guess maybe that or maybe Butterfly. That'd be one of those things where it's least favorite good song.
Yeah. If I didn't know about the concept of the album, I think Butterfly would be a contender for that, but it ties everything
and that's
together.
The thing is I didn't. You're changing my life. Let's go through the three best songs on the album.
All right.
So my number 3 is Get You. To me, it's the hardest hitting one on the album, and it's the only one that, even though they're still goofing off, he sounds kind of mad. Mm-hmm. There's an angriness behind it that I like.
Yeah. When I wrote it down as my least favorite or the worst song, and then I listened to it again, I'm like, no, it still has that silliness, but it's like, it's kind of gritty. And I like those funky vocalizations he does, which is just stupid and fun.
Yeah. My number 2 is The Good Life. That song, there's some songs that I just wish that I would have written. And it's just so cool. That'd be such a fun song to be able to play live.
Yeah.
And then my number 1 song is Tired of Sex. That's definitely in my top 5 favorite track 1 side ones.
Wow, really?
I love the start. I love the slow beginning into the heavy drum beats into the guitar. His little weird screams. Mm-hmm. That guitar solo.
Yeah.
It's succinct. I fucking love that song. I love it so much. What are your 3 favorites, Evil?
My number 3 is The Good Life. It feels like the hit song on the album that should have been a hit song, but wasn't a hit song. It's everything I love about Weezer. The good Weezer songs, that's like a great example of a good Weezer song.
I agree.
My 2 and 1 flip-flop. I have it written down one way, and I'm in my mind changing it right now. And I'm just going to stick with the way I have it written down, which was counter to what I wanted to write down. Number 2 is El Scorcho. I think it's my favorite song on the album.
It's such a good song.
And it might be my number 1. I don't know. Let's just say my 1 and 2 are interchangeable depending on... I need so much more time with this because that's the song I knew. So I've had a lot of time with it. It's got such a good chorus. Mm-hmm. Just the sounds they're making and stuff. The lyrics are... they're especially clever when you factor it into the concept of the album. I love the listening to Cho Cho San Falling in Love all over again. I fucking love that.
Out of all the songs on the album, that one is the most... You picture them playing it live. You just want to see them play it so bad because you can hear them all hopping around and screaming, and
it feels
bring
like a
home
party.
The turkey if you bring home the bacon, and they're all screaming with each other, and it's just so fun.
It could be 1 or 2. We'll leave it 2 for now because I put Tired of Sex as number 1.
Really?
That guitar solo, man.
It's so good.
Yep. And the fact that I hated it when I first listened to it and now it's my number 1 says something about that song.
That's very surprising. Okay. Yep. That's fantastic. We both had the same favorite songs for both these albums.
Yeah.
We're so smart.
Twins.
Evil. Who won the album?
Die-hard Weezer fans won this album because it gave them something that nobody else has.
I think who won this album? Everyone that was my age at the time that was in a band.
Ooh, nice.
This was like the fucking garage band blueprint.
Yeah.
And I do remember there was about a year stint where we played, I think it might have been The Good Life or something like that. That was like our warm up, with Sven and Brent. That was like how we got warmed up with.
Right on, man. What's Sven's take on Weezer? I don't think I've heard him talk about Weezer.
Sven likes Weezer. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely see
I don't know his take on later Weezer. I would imagine he's much more of a fan than we are.
Sure, because he's more tolerant than us.
Way more. But back then, he loved him. We played Say It Ain't So a lot, too. Every 14-year-old band did. Rate the album. I'm going to go first. Look, if I was going favorite albums, I'll have to wait till we do like a Weezer dissection. This might be my favorite Weezer album, but there's something about it that I don't think it's a 10 out of 10. And I feel like it almost does it justice not giving it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
The sloppiness and the attitude leads it to, I don't know. There's something about giving it a 10 out of 10 is too clean and too pretty. So I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 half Japanese girls.
Ooh.
I don't think it's completely perfect, but I love this album so much.
Very, very nice.
What about you?
It's not quite a 9 out of 10 for me. It's so very close. If I were to listen to this a ton, and I'm going to be straight up honest, I don't know if I'm going to have the time to listen to this a whole bunch more.
Yeah. We don't get the time to listen to music anymore, man.
In a world where I had time to really put this album into my musical rotation, it could grow on me more. I'm going to give it 8.89 sweaters with a little bit of thread missing.
I like it a lot. That is Pinkerton and Jupiter. I miss doing these. I'm glad that we still do a few of them a year. Evil, are you ready for a big long break and then recording of another episode?
Oh man, I'm gonna go relax by the pool,
Yeah.
kick up the feet, enjoy my time off.
Awesome. Verse Course First at versecoursefirst.com. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Hope you're well. Hope we did the albums, if you tuned in to listen and love them, justice. It's not going to seem like it, but we're going to be right back. So yeah, good night and good luck.
I wanna stay right by your side, 'cause you and me fit together naturally.